For a majority of investors, HSA accounts might not even be on the radar, but when it comes to this triple tax advantage account, it is one that you need to be investing in. Now, on Thursday, which was yesterday, 2026, they introduced the contribution limits that have been increasing year over year to HSAs, and getting this triple tax benefit is going to be a game changer for you now, but also during retirement years when medical expenses could increase. So starting in 2026, the new contribution limits will be $4,400 for self. And then of course, this is coming up from $4,300. So you're going to be able to make contributions another $100 or increase by $100. This is based on inflation adjustments for the HSA. Now, when we look at the family coverage, which I personally do have, the coverage goes to $8,750 from $8,550 in 2025, according to this update. Now, why is it a big game changer? When we start looking at medical expenses and the ability to put money in the HSA, it is very similar to a 401k, very similar to an IRA, which they have contribution limits to really limit what you do put in there. Because if you could stack a ton of money in there, it would make a big difference if you could make a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 contribution if you had the money, but you have to do that over a multitude of years. Now, to be eligible for this HSA, you must have what they consider a high deductible healthcare plan. So you need to have a talk with your employer or your health plan administrator and see if you do qualify for an HSA account, because this is something that you do not want to pass up. Now, when we look at the definition per the IRS, high deductible healthcare plan is $1,700 for self-covered individuals, $3,400 for family plans for the increase. And also, the plan has capped the yearly out-of-pocket expense, which is capped at $8,500 for individuals, $17,000 for family coverage. If you think about being able to put that $8,750 into the account for the HSA and having a max out-of-pocket at $17,000, you don't want to use the emergency fund. You don't want to have to sock away a ton of money outside of an HSA. But in addition, a lot of people are not familiar with the kind of in and outs, how the HSA works, but also what you can use it for when you start looking at qualified medical expenses, when you start thinking of things that you really buy health-wise on a regular basis. This could include, aspirin, could be Band-Aids, could be a couple other things, but also covering dental expenses as well. And if you start looking and really digging down into what HSA accounts cover, there is a ton of medical procedures that they cover, even a lot of things that you might not even think about. And when you start looking at it, it makes it super easy. For instance, let's say I'm going to have a medical expense. I'm going to have to pay $300. That is what they're charging me at the doctor's. If you are not making contributions to the HSA, you can go ahead and make that $300 contribution to your HSA, get your tax advantage for it, then use the money that you just placed in the HSA to pay for the medical bill. It is really a self-providing tax advantage account, because that $300 that you just used to pay for the medical expense, you can deduct that from your earned income, meaning that if you're an individual that's making, let's say, $100,000 a year, you put $5,000 in that HSA, now you're only taxed on $95,000, which is a game changer when it comes to trying to really minimize the impact of taxes. Now, when we start thinking about the triple tax benefit, this is one, again, that a lot of people do kind of get caught up with, but financial advisors recommend investing and really looking at the balance over a long term versus current year, which again, I don't really understand. If cash flow can permit, what they're saying is make contributions, leave it in the HSA account, just pay medical expenses that you normally would with cash in your pocket, but continuing to build up the HSA account. And it is because of the triple tax advantage. So the reason health savings really has benefits, number one, you make contributions when you're putting money into the HSA, just like we were talking about, you get a tax deduction. Number two, you can invest the money in the HSA. Me personally, I have mine through Blue Cross and Blue Shield. You can invest it. It will grow within that HSA. And the money that is in there, very similar to a Roth, is going to be completely tax-free. And the third one, when you use the money for qualified medical expenses, you do not pay tax on the money that you're taking out of there. It is kind of incredible to see that you have it. Now, there is a counterpart to this, which is the FSA account. You have to be careful because you cannot roll over some of these accounts year over year, meaning if you switch jobs, if it's the end of the year, a lot of the FSA accounts do have to be used in the entirety based on the contributions you're putting in there. But when we start looking at healthcare expenses, me personally, I'm an individual that maxes out my HSA every single year. A lot of medical expenses and a lot of different things. Healthcare expenses can be very significant. They are estimating a single 65-year-old in 2024 could expect to spend on average $165,000 on medical expenses through the golden years of retirement, according to Fidelity, which is incredible. And of course, the $165,000 we were just talking about does not include long-term care. So when you start stacking on the bills, you're talking $250,000, if not more, depending on the level of need that you have during retirement. And again, when it comes to long-term care, we know this is super expensive. So most people do use HSAs for their current expenses or have access to it. In 2024, 2/3 of companies in the United States offered an investment option or an HSA that you could go in there, polling more than 500 employers in the summer of 2024. Now, when we start thinking of HSA accounts, only 18% of participants were investing anything at all into the HSA balance, which is down slightly from 17% in the previous year. So think about this for a minute. 2/3 of companies offer an HSA plan. So let's just say rough math, that's 66%. Of that 66% that is eligible for that HSA, 18% of participants were investing in their HSA balance, which again is kind of crazy. Ultimately, most participants still are using or not using an HSA at all to cover any of their current expenses, which again is kind of crazy because you have access to a very big, very large tax account that you could grow with a multitude of years and having the ability to use this when you need it the most. For me personally, I want to get to the point, and like I had said earlier, we are capping out this HSA account every single year, meaning we want to get to the account. So think about it. If it's at $87.50 next year, over the next 10 years, we know contributions are going to increase, but let's say systematically they didn't increase over the next 10 years. That would put around $87,000 in the HSA. That is halfway, just about halfway to covering the medical expenses that they expect for an individual. Now imagine if you have an entire family, when you have your kids, if you do have medical expenses far and above that, if they're lower, great, you oversaved, you still have money in the HSA. But if you're at the point where you want to cover medical expenses, and again, I think about this during retirement, I think about in the next 20 years, when I'm 65 years of age, am I going to have need for an HSA? Of course, because there are going to be medical expenses. And if you don't have that high deductible healthcare plan, you do not have the ability to make contributions into the HSA. If we're looking to retire early, it even shortens that time frame for my ability to make contributions into the HSA and really bringing the window into the next 5 to 10 years. Again, if we're planning early retirement, being able to stockpile money in the HSA, that way when we do start collecting Social Security, when we start getting that dividend income, when it comes to medical expenses, they will already be covered by the HSA account that we do have. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching.